Hey everyone, tonight we're traveling thousands of years back in time to the banks of the Nile, into a civilization famous for its pyramids, pharaohs and gods who were said to watch your every move. But beneath the golden masks and towering temples lies a much tougher truth. Today we're asking, what would it really be like to spend just one day in ancient Egypt? Spoiler, it's not just the sun that might roast you alive. Before we dive in, feel free to like and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy this kind of content. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for. I always enjoy seeing how far this community reaches. Now dim the lights. Maybe switch on a fan for some ambient white noise. Let's ease into our journey. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a land of gods, pyramids, and relentless sun exposure. Before you even open your eyes, sunlight is already pouring into your reed hut, like it's trying to audition for the role of sky deity of vengeance. There are no curtains, no blinds, and definitely no air conditioning. Just raw desert heat radiating into every surface, including you. By the time breakfast rolls around, you're lying on a straw mat under a linen sheet that does little more than hint at coverage. That cooling Nile breeze you heard about in documentaries, long gone, probably disappeared around 2800 BC. By the time you step outside, it's already approaching 90 degrees, or about 32 degrees, and it's not even mid-morning. In ancient Egypt, the sun doesn't just shine, it assaults. Your linen tunic, practically tissue paper in a sauna. Sunscreen? Doesn't exist. No aloe, no SPF, not even a floppy resort hat. Sure, protective oils were used, but unless you're wealthy or temple-affiliated, good luck getting your hands on any. Your best bet, smear on mud or crocodile dung, which allegedly might offer some protection. Might. By midday, the stones beneath your feet are hot enough to cook lentils. Shade is rare. Trees are sparse. If you're lucky, you can crouch behind a mud brick wall, but even that wall feels like it's sweating. Meanwhile, you resemble something pulled from a pottery kiln, but don't complain. Ra, the sun god, is watching. And here, the sun isn't just weather, it's divine authority. The hotter the day, the more powerful Ra is believed to be. So, if you're melting, consider it a compliment from the heavens. Surviving one day in ancient Egypt means staying hydrated, being humble, and developing a serious tolerance for being oven-roasted. And that's just the morning. You finally rise, roll off your scratchy mat, and head to the Nile, which is conveniently nearby. Unfortunately, you can smell it before you see it. The Nile. Sacred, life-giving, the foundation of this entire civilization. But also, let's be real, it smells like a swamp broke up with a fish market. The riverbank is alive with flies, frogs, and creatures whose anatomy defies explanation. Still, this is your bath. Soap isn't a thing yet. And if it were, it would be a luxury. Instead, you rely on the best cleansing method available, sand. That's right, exfoliation via nature's own sandpaper. Just rub and call it skincare laundry, also done here, which means pounding clothes against rocks while praying no crocodile mistakes your tunic for a snack. And to make things more interesting, there's occasional sewage runoff. Remember, people, animals, and even funerary boats share this water source. And yet, this is your clean water. You scrub, rinse, and emerge only slightly less sticky, marginally more concerned about leeches. If you're in a city like Memphis or Thebes, you might have access to a public basin. For everyone else, it's Nile or nothing. And don't expect solitude. You're bathing alongside families, neighbors, livestock, and the occasional ibis, which seems far too comfortable around your feet. Once clean-ish, you fill water jars and balance them on your head for the walk home, before the sun turns the walls of your house into toasted clay. It's a sacred ritual, a necessary one, and, yes, a mildly traumatic one. So while the Nile sustains you, let's not pretend it's a pristine oasis. It's equal parts miracle, health hazard, and your only option. You've now bathed in crocodile-infested waters, exfoliated with sand, and baked under the morning sun. It's time for breakfast, arguably the most vital yet least glamorous part of your day. Set your expectations low. There are no eggs Benedict, no colorful fruit bowls, and definitely no iced lattes. Breakfast here is about survival, not flavor. You either perch on a stool if you're lucky, or squat in a corner like everyone else. The main event, bread. Dense, coarse, and usually as tough as a leather shoe. Made from emmer wheat or barley, baked in shared clay ovens, often with the local rodent population. And yes, your bread comes with bonus grit, thanks to the grinding stones. Think of it as a daily mineral supplement. Next up, beer. But don't get excited. It's not a crisp lager, it's a thick, cloudy, lukewarm, drinkable loaf. More porridge than pint. High in calories and vaguely fermented, it tastes like sour cereal and staying alive. Even kids drink it, not to be rebellious, but because it's safer than Nile water. Brewing at least boils out the parasites. If fortune smiles upon you, you might get a dried date or an onion on the side. Protein? Only if someone caught a fish and decided to share. As you munch your sandy bread and sip your chunky brew, flies orbit you like you're hosting an open buffet. You swat with one hand and hold your drink with the other, fully aware this is probably the best meal you'll get today. In short, breakfast in ancient Egypt is not about indulgence. It's about function, enough fuel to keep you upright until someone hands you the next sand-filled ration. Bon appétit. You've had your gritty meal and a short rest. Now it's time for work, and ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout look like a long weekend. Unless you're a scribe, priest, or royalty, and let's face it, you're not. Your job involves raw physical effort. No cubicles, no coffee, breaks, no lumbar support, just sun, sand, and constant exhaustion. If you're a farmer, you're in the fields by sunrise, knee-deep in Nile mud, pulling weeds or planting grain, while a supervisor yells at you like it's his calling. You use basic wooden tools and your own hands. Back pain. That's confirmation you're doing it right. If you're a laborer, your day is even more intense. You're hauling massive stones for temple construction under the desert sun, barefoot, up ramps made of dust and prayer. Injure yourself? That's too bad. Keep moving. Working on tombs. That's a whole new level of effort. You chisel out burial chambers for the elite, people who'll rest longer than you'll ever dream of. And if you ruin a pharaoh's tomb, that's more than a bad performance review. That's sealed inside forever territory. Women don't get a break either. Domestic labor is constant, grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, raising children, and still helping in the fields. Your rest is a baby's 7-minute nap. Meals are eaten standing up, sweat wiped with your sleeve. There's no time to stop, fall behind, and someone else gets your grain quota, and you get the blame. You don't clock out here. The sun is your timekeeper. When it finally dips below the horizon, you drag yourself home, caked in dust, aching everywhere, dreaming of cooler weather and gentler gods. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just exhausting, it's endless. A full-body, full-time commitment to survival until your body breaks down or someone higher up decides you're no longer useful. And the worst part? You can't even complain. Grumbling, even quietly, is risky. In ancient Egypt, your ruler isn't just a political figure. He's divine. The pharaoh is believed to be the living embodiment of Horus, the son of Ra, placed here to uphold cosmic order. If the harvest is good, thank the pharaoh. If it fails, maybe you didn't pray enough. Speaking ill of him, that's not just rude, it's a spiritual offense. You might earn a flogging, imprisonment, or worse. His face is everywhere, statues, temple carvings, even molds for your bread. His name is chanted in rituals. He's always the biggest figure in every mural, not for effect, but by law, and no, you'll probably never see him. The closest you'll get is glimpsing his golden boat float by during a ceremony. Blink, and he's gone. back to his palace surrounded by guards, scribes, and enough wealth to finance a kingdom. Which essentially he does if you're assigned to a royal project, a tomb, a temple, or a colossal statue. You serve with joy. At least that's what the state expects. It's safer to fake devotion than express resentment. Rebellion? Not an option. Pharaohs crush uprisings before the word dynasty leaves your mouth. Just ask the last village that withheld taxes, oh wait, you can't. It's gone. So yes, the Pharaoh is a god. And you're fortunate just to sweat in his service. Now back to it. If you think the sun is your biggest problem, think again. In ancient Egypt, sand is everywhere, and it's out to get you. It's your roommate, your condiment, and your worst enemy. It seeps into everything: clothes, bedding, food. A gust of wind, and your face becomes an unwilling exfoliation experiment. Your clothes, linen, lightweight, breathable, and utterly useless at keeping sand out. It slides into every fold, sticks to your skin, and finds places you didn't know existed. Eating? Every bite of bread is a gamble. Flour was ground with stone slabs, so grit ended up in the dough. Egyptians didn't just eat wheat, they ate their grinding tools too. That's why dental remains show worn flat teeth like polished stones. Every meal was also a tooth-filing session, and if you thought your home was a refuge, well, stay tuned. And Bastet, the cat goddess, basically handles public relations. Forget about personal freedom. Your day is dedicated to keeping the gods happy. You wake up, thank Ra, spill some beer, apologize to Hathor, stub your toe, curse under your breath, or you might attract a grudge-holding spirit. Before meals, you offer a bit of food to the gods. Before bed, you pray, Set, God of Chaos. Doesn't turn your house into a cosmic mess overnight. Even funerals are elaborate, multi-day events. The dead must pass tests, dodge demons, and prove they lived morally decent lives, or risk being erased from existence. The afterlife wasn't taken lightly. You didn't just die and move on. You had to face judgment, where your heart was weighed against a feather, the feather of Ma'at, symbol of truth. If your heart was too heavy from dishonesty, cruelty, or, say, goat theft, it was fed to Amit, a terrifying hybrid of crocodile head, lion body, and something from your worst nightmares. So yes, even in death, you were still under review. But here's the thing, this system wasn't depressing, it was reassuring. Ancient Egyptians saw life as part of a divine balance. If you performed your rituals and followed Ma'at, the principle of truth and harmony, you could earn a peaceful eternity, complete with family, food, and possibly a boat. Naturally, wealth played a role. The richer you were, the more divine. Attention you got. Temples were grand, priests were powerful, and common folk hoped for divine generosity. Because in ancient Egypt, faith wasn't optional. It was your daily duty, your health insurance, and your afterlife travel guide. So you've stepped on something sharp, gotten bitten by something strange, or picked up a mystery illness, which, in ancient Egypt, is just a regular Tuesday. Time to seek medical care, but don't expect a clean clinic or quiet waiting room. Healing involved a mix of herbs, spells, and optimism. You'd first visit a doctor who, to be fair, was often well-trained. They had surgical tools, medical scrolls, and a decent grasp of anatomy. But Egyptian medicine always combined science with magic. You might get a poultice made of honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs, oddly effective, since honey is antibacterial and mold contains early penicillin. But before applying it, the doctor would recite a protective spell. Just in case your stomach ache was caused by a vengeful spirit. Headache? You might get crushed onions rubbed into your scalp while someone recites a hymn. Chest pain? Maybe cow dung mixed with dates. Eye infection? Try a paste of lizard blood, ochre, and beer with a prayer to Horus. And yes, surgery happened. Abscesses were drained, bones were reset, and wounds stitched with linen thread. No anesthesia, though, just a knife and a strong friend to hold you down. Dentistry? Let's just say it wasn't great. Thanks to sand in the bread, your teeth were likely worn out by your 20s. If one got infected, your options were live with it, die from it, or have it pulled using crude pliers made by a blacksmith with questionable craftsmanship. And don't forget the amulets. Whether giving birth, being stitched up, or sneezing, the doctor-priest might hang a charm around your neck just in case a ghost snake was coiled around your spleen. So yes, Egyptian medicine had its breakthroughs, but your bandage came with a prayer. Here's a twist most people don't expect. Ancient Egyptian women had more legal rights than many women in later civilizations. They could own land, run businesses, get divorced, and take men to court. Sounds empowering, right? But before you book a time travel trip for a feminist getaway, slow down. Because while women had rights on paper, daily life wasn't glamorous. If you were a woman in ancient Egypt, you likely woke up before dawn to grind grain by hand using a giant flat stone, hard on both wheat and your back. Then you'd haul water from the Nile, cook, care for kids, manage the house, feed animals, and even help in the fields. You were a one-woman workforce in linen. There were no breaks, no spa days, and definitely no maternity leave. Childbirth was dangerous and painful. Midwives helped, but there were no pain meds, no sterilization, and no calming music. You gave birth in a hot room, with incense and prayers, and hopefully minimal bleeding. Fashion. Linen dresses were breathable, but there was no underwear and no shoes. The sun roasted your skin. Sand got into everything, and bugs treated you like a snack bar. Makeup. Sure, Egyptian women wore it, but it was lead-based and applied with tools that looked like toothpicks. If you were born wealthy, life was better. You might read, write, manage estates, or become a priestess. If you were royal, like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, you might even become pharaoh, leading with brains and eyeliner. But if you were poor, your rights didn't change the physical demands of your life. You worked, sweated, bent, carried, gave birth, buried, and prayed. You weren't legally owned, but survival kept you bound. Still, women had agency. They could testify in court, keep their inheritance, and didn't become property upon marriage. Compared to many ancient societies, that was monumental. So, yes, Egyptian women had rights, but comfort. That was for statues and goddesses, not for the woman kneading dough while swatting flies off her toddler. You've survived another exhausting day in ancient Egypt. You've eaten gritty bread, hauled water, avoided divine anger, and maybe even escaped a sandstorm. Time to rest, right? Not quite. Because in Egypt, the real journey begins after death. Death wasn't the end. It was the start of a long, bureaucratic voyage through the underworld. And if you thought the living was strict, wait until you meet the gods of judgment. Your soul first visits the Hall of Maat. There, before a tribunal of 42 deities, you proclaim your innocence in what's basically the oldest legal deposition. You say things like, I didn't steal, I didn't lie, I didn't covet my neighbor's donkey. And you hope the gods believe you. Then comes the heart test. Your heart, thought to be the soul's core, is weighed against the feather of Maat. If it's heavier, meaning you were immoral, it gets fed to Amit. Part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, all nightmare. She doesn't judge, she devours, no afterlife, no do-over. Just eternal nothingness, Egypt's worst punishment. And here's the kicker, you could fail not just through bad deeds, but by messing up your lines. Forget one part of the ritual, that's it. It's like an open book test where failure means being eaten by a supernatural monster. But if you pass, you're rewarded with the field of reeds. It's a serene, perfected Egypt where you live forever with crops, boats, family, and probably fewer sand fleas. The stakes were enormous. That's why Egyptians obsessed over burials, tombs, and magical texts like the Book of the Dead, a spiritual guide packed with prayers, spells, and pro tips like, don't insult the crocodile god. So yes, the afterlife could be beautiful if You lived carefully. One bad word, one missed offering, and your next stop is Amit's lunch plate. Sleep well. If there's one mercy in ancient Egypt, it's this: linen, cool, breathable linen. Everyone's wardrobe revolved around this plant-based fabric. It kept you relatively comfortable in the searing heat. But that's where the comfort mostly ends. Whether farmer, builder, priest, or vendor, you wore the same basic thing every day. Men wore short white kilts or loincloths. Women wore sleeveless, straight linen dresses. Upper-class folks might have beads, pleats, or patterns. Everyone else? Plain white or grey, depending on laundry timing. Speaking of laundry, prepare to scrub your clothes by hand in the Nile while praying no hippos show up mid-rinse. Shoes? Rare. Sandals made of reeds or leather were saved for ceremonies or temple. Work. Unless you were elite, you went barefoot, hot sand, sharp rocks and all. Accessories. Yes, but functional. Amulets for protection, necklaces for status, and eyeliner not just for looks. It reduced glare and may have helped with eye infections. But no matter how nicely you dressed, the insects didn't care. Flies, gnats, mosquitoes. They treated your airy outfit like an open invitation. You swatted, applied perfumed oils, and hoped your linen didn't glue itself to you like a damp curtain by noon. And seasons? Egypt didn't really have them. Just hot and slightly less hot. So that linen outfit, it was your uniform year-round, whether it was 110 degrees or a cool 70 degrees night. Sure, Egyptian clothing was more comfortable than what the Romans wore later, but don't be fooled. Your breezy look didn't lighten the burden of heat, labor, or pests that refused to respect your space. You've survived another brutal day, hauling bricks, dodging storms, and hoping your linen holds up. But in ancient Egypt, survival was always short-lived, because no matter how strong you were, odds were you wouldn't live past 35. Let's break it down. If you survived childhood, which was already tough due to high infant mortality, you were considered an adult by 13. Marriage, labor, and parenthood all started early because time wasn't on your side. You might die from heat stroke, an infected wound, childbirth, crocodiles, scorpions, or simply moldy bread. There were no antibiotics. If you got a fever, your best bet was honey, herbs, and hoping the gods had other plans for your soul. But here's the twist. Egyptians weren't afraid of death. They planned for it, sometimes better than we plan for retirement today. If you were wealthy, you commissioned a tomb, basically a luxury suite for eternity. You stockpiled grave goods, jewelry, food, perfumes, statues, even small servant dolls called shabtis to do your chores in the next life. Think of them as spiritual interns, so you could nap forever. Your body was embalmed, wrapped in linen, treated with salt, and placed in a painted coffin. You were buried with the Book of the Dead, not a horror story, but a mystical manual full of spells, passwords, and tips for navigating the afterlife. If you were poor, your tomb was likely a simple pit in the sand. You'd be wrapped in whatever cloth your family could spare, maybe a pot or two nearby, then covered in dirt. No gold mask, no murals, just you and the wind. But even the poorest held onto the hope of the field of reeds, a perfect paradise where you could farm without effort, eat without hunger, and sail endlessly. Grave robbers came anyway, usually under the cover of night, armed with insider knowledge. Sometimes they were locals. Other times, they were workers who had helped build the tombs. In some cases, even priests or guards were involved. The consequences of getting caught were harsh: public beatings, mutilation, exile, even execution. But the rewards often outweighed the risks. Tomb goods, especially gold and rare incense, were incredibly valuable, and the dead don't fight back. But it wasn't just the rich who were targeted. Even the resting places of commoners weren't safe. Poor Egyptians were sometimes buried with a simple pot of beer or a loaf of bread for the afterlife. Those were still worth stealing. Food was scarce, tools had value, linen could be used as currency. Ironically, tomb robbing wasn't always about greed. Sometimes it was about survival. Egypt endured famines, political collapse, and foreign invasions. A starving worker might break into a tomb not for gold, but for something to eat. And when your children are hungry, funeral offerings can start to look less like sacred tributes and more like dinner. In ancient Egypt, death didn't guarantee peace. Your tomb could be looted, your name erased, and your body unwrapped by someone. Desperate and morally compromised. Rest in peace, only if no one knows where you're buried. We've all seen them, those beautiful cryptic carvings on temple walls and tombs. Birds, eyes, cobras, lotus flowers, and sideways walking men like they're posing on a runway. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, visually striking and extremely complex. Sure, they're fascinating to look at, but reading them is another story. Hieroglyphs weren't just decorative symbols. They formed an entire writing system with over 700 characters, and more were added over time. Some stood for whole words, others represented sounds, and many were determinatives, symbols added to clarify meaning. Writing the word star with an actual star symbol, too easy. Forget about spaces or punctuation. Egyptian writing was a continuous puzzle. Artful, vowel-free, and deeply reliant on context. Oh, and direction mattered. Hieroglyphs could be written left to right to left, or top to bottom, depending on the scribe's preference. The trick? Look at which direction the figures face. Birds and people looking right, read right. Facing left, go left. Upside down. Good luck. Learning this script wasn't for the average person. Literacy was rare. Only about 1% of the population could read or write. To gain that privilege, you had to train as a scribe starting in childhood. You'd memorize hundreds of symbols, endlessly copy scrolls, and write so much your hand might cramp permanently by age 15. But the reward was worth it. Scribes were respected, well-fed, and exempt from backbreaking labor. They handled everything, from tax records to court rulings, personal letters and sacred texts. In a society where writing meant power, scribes wielded it quietly but significantly. For everyone else, writing seemed almost magical. Hieroglyphs were believed to hold divine energy. Writing someone's name could preserve their soul. Erasing it, that meant spiritual extinction. So yes, spelling mattered. While they might resemble ancient emoji, hieroglyphs were more like a mythological Rubik's Cube, one wrapped in sacred tradition, math, and artistic flair. Beautiful. Absolutely. Easy. Not in the slightest. After 14 chapters of scorching heat, hunger, sandstorms, superstitions, and relentless labor, we reach the big question. Would you survive a day in ancient Egypt? Realistically, probably not. It's tempting. To idealize the past, golden tombs, perfumed air, elegant hieroglyphs, and gods with animal heads. But behind the breathtaking monuments and brilliant artwork was a harsh world that spared no one but the elite. A typical day for an ordinary Egyptian began on a dirt floor, surrounded by flies, and with the understanding that if you didn't work, you didn't eat. You walked barefoot over hot sand, fetched water, cooked over open flames, and lived in crowded spaces with insects, livestock, and smoke. You worried about illness, curses, and whether a snake might crawl under your bedroll. There was no toothpaste, no pain relief, no health plan. If you were lucky, you owned 2 sets of linen clothes. You served a divine ruler who could confiscate your property with a decree, endured a punishing climate, and adhered to a religion where entering the afterlife required passing a literal, divine test. Let's not forget what you didn't have. No antibiotics, sunscreen, privacy, plumbing, or career mobility. You were born into your station, scribe, farmer, laborer, mother, servant, or you died. Yet for all the hardship, Egyptians weren't hopeless. They held a strong belief in their gods, their place in the world, and the beauty of existence. They celebrated music, dance, food, family, and religious festivals. They laughed, they created. They envisioned eternity so clearly they built in stone to last forever. But for the modern person, used to filtered water, medication, air conditioning, shoes and phones, you wouldn't make it past your first sandstorm. And that's fine, because they survived for millennia. And maybe that's why we're still talking about them. In the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, one pyramid defies time and memory. It's not covered in peaceful symbols or gentle deities, but with fierce, wide-eyed serpents, jaws agape in mid-strike. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, also known as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. Unlike most sacred buildings designed to inspire awe or serenity, this one feels aggressive. From the moment you draw near, it's as if something is watching. The serpent heads aren't decoration, they're warnings, and beneath them, archaeologists have uncovered something far darker. Excavations revealed more than ritual objects. They found human remains, hundreds of them. Over 200 bodies, many decapitated, hands bound behind their backs, buried in organized clusters. Likely warriors, possibly sacrifices. Some bodies were found with obsidian blades. Others wore jewelry made from human teeth or jawbones. These people weren't tossed into a pit. They were deliberately placed in symbolic positions. This was no mass grave. It was a statement, a spiritual transaction carved into stone and sealed with blood. What kind of worldview justifies that? Who demanded so many lives in one place? The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a place of worship. It was a stage for authority, where rulers combined religion, warfare, and fear to control a population of over 100,000 people. And this ritual killing may have been the cost of keeping the cosmos in balance. Stand before the temple today and look into those stone eyes. You're not just seeing ancient art. You're seeing the ideology of a civilization that believed the gods needed blood and that they had the right to provide it. But who were these people who orchestrated such violence and left behind no name? They lived in Teotihuacan long before the Aztecs, before the Mayas' calendar cities. A civilization that built one of the greatest cities in the ancient Americas, then vanished. Teotihuacan is the name later given by the Aztecs. It means place where gods were born, and when you walk its grand avenue of the dead, lined with towering pyramids, you understand why. At its peak, from around 100 to 250 CE, Teotihuacan housed over 100,000 people, rivaling Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an in size and influence. It was meticulously planned. Broad avenues, gridded streets, multifamily housing, and multi-story buildings made of volcanic stone. At its center stood three colossal pyramids: the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here's what sets Teotihuacan apart. We still don't know who built it. No royal names, no written records. Not even what they called themselves. There's no evidence of a single king. It might have been governed by a council, a priesthood, or something entirely alien to our idea of rule. Still, their reach was immense. Artifacts from Teotihuacan have been found across Mesoamerica, from Maya cities like Tikal and Copan to the Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, ceramic designs, and murals all hint at their power. In one instance, Teotihuacan emissaries may have helped depose a Maya king to install someone more aligned with their interests. So how did a society with no known writing system exert such control through ideology and architecture? Their temples aligned with celestial events, hosted elaborate rituals, and reinforced the city's divine authority. Every structure told you this was no ordinary place. It was the center of the universe, where time, fate, and sacrifice flowed together, and at the city's heart stood the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. To understand this temple, you must understand the god it honored, the Feathered Serpent. Later called Quetzalcoatl by the Aztecs and Kukulkan by the Maya, this deity is among the most mysterious in all Mesoamerican belief. But in Teotihuacan, centuries before Aztec dominance, the feathered serpent may have been the supreme divine force, And here's the paradox. What kind of God is both serpent and bird? Serpents crawl through the underworld, shedding skin, symbolizing death and renewal. Birds soar skyward, associated with divinity, life, and wind. Combining these opposites created something cosmic, something powerful and terrifying. The feathered serpent was not just a god. He was a bridge between worlds. The temple's facade displays dozens of carved snakebird figures. Wide eyes, sharp teeth, feathered crowns. Some say they're depictions of the god. Others believe they're priests or warriors dressed in divine garb. Either way, they cover the structure, as if the temple itself breathed divinity. This god wasn't just about wisdom or wind. He was tied to sacrifice. Blood was the offering that kept the universe running. Quetzalcoatl, often remembered as a peaceful culture hero, had a darker side here. He demanded life. In some stories, he descended into the underworld to collect bones and create humans. But to bring life from death, a price had to be paid. The gods gave their blood for humankind, and humanity, in return, gave it back. Scattered nearby were objects as dark as night, tools unmistakably meant for ritual sacrifice. And this is where the story takes a more unsettling turn. The placement of the bodies wasn't haphazard. They followed deliberate geometric and symbolic layouts. These people weren't simply buried. They were arranged in quadrants, aligned with the cardinal directions, possibly to reflect a cosmic order. Even the number of bodies was significant. This wasn't just death, it was meaningful death. Around them lay offerings, jaguar bones, serpents, rare shells from the distant Gulf Coast, figurines, and pristine obsidian blades never used in battle. This wasn't retribution. It was reverence. These young men, likely warriors, weren't chosen to die in shame, but to participate in something transcendent. For the people of Teotihuacan, building a temple may have required human life as its foundation. Each stone laid, each layer raised, seemed to demand a consecration in blood. And the deeper archaeologists dig, the more sacrifice they uncover. In one chamber, they found tunnels lined with mercury and mica, materials linked to the underworld. The floor shimmered like water. Could this have been a symbolic gateway to the afterlife? A mirror of the night sky? It became clear this temple wasn't built over death, it was built around it. The blood didn't just touch the stone by chance. The stone was designed to hold it, and it was all for the gods. Examine the temple of the feathered serpent more closely, and something unsettling emerges. It doesn't just occupy the landscape, it aligns with the cosmos. Teotihuacan wasn't constructed at random. The entire city was oriented with astronomical precision. The Avenue of the Dead runs 15 degrees off true north, not by accident but by design. This deviation may have been to align with the setting of the Pleiades cluster or the sun during specific ritual events. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sits precisely along this avenue, anchoring it into a grand celestial framework. But what exactly was it aligning with? Archaeologists and archaeoastronomers have debated this for years. Some suggest it lines up with the sunrise on the equinox. Others say it tracks Venus, a planet sacred to Mesoamerican cultures, often linked to warfare, sacrifice, and rebirth. Venus's appearance marked time for declarations of war, sacrificial offerings, and ritual ceremonies. Even the temple's layout echoes cosmic intent. The number 7, representing the known planetary bodies, repeats in its steps. The design shows balance, rhythm, and a sophisticated grasp of earthly and celestial patterns. And beneath the surface, more revelations. In 2003, a tunnel was found beneath the temple, not crude, but engineered with purpose. Its walls once glittered with powdered pyrite, reflecting torchlight like stars. Combined with mercury pools and mica-coated surfaces, it recreated a miniature cosmos. Walking through it may have felt like traveling through the Milky Way. an imagined journey through the underworld or toward rebirth. This temple, then, may not have been just a site of sacrifice, but a cosmic machine, a spiritual gateway, uniting earth, sky, and the divine. Many scholars believe Teotihuacan viewed time as cyclical, not linear. Rituals, structures, sacrifices, none were one-time acts. They were recurring moments in an eternal rhythm. Death led to regeneration. Sacrifice sustained renewal. These celestial alignments may have allowed for the tracking of stars, timing of crops, and, most crucially, the scheduling of offerings. The temple wasn't merely observing the stars, it was speaking to them. But it wasn't just a spiritual hub, it was also a display of power. Its architecture served as a political statement. Its size and symbolism projected dominance and command. Imagine arriving here 1,800 years ago. You're a visitor from a smaller city-state. As you walk the Avenue of the Dead, Teotihuacan's scale leaves you in awe. Then you reach the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and you stop. Stone serpent heads glare down at you, fangs exposed. Jaguar motifs snarl from the walls. The plaza, once filled with massive crowds, served not only celebration, but public ritual. You might even witness a sacrifice. Teotihuacan's rulers understood something fundamental. Fear is power, and nothing incites fear like divine anger. By staging executions in broad daylight, surrounded by cosmic symbols, they made their message unmistakably clear. The gods favor us, and we are not afraid to feed them. But this wasn't random bloodshed. It was choreographed ritual. Priests in feathered robes and obsidian masks chanted, danced, and spilled blood, transforming myth into political spectacle. This wasn't just about divine favor. It was about control. The ruling elite claimed exclusive access to the gods. They could summon rain or ruin. From the temple's heights, they overlooked the crowds below. They controlled the stage and the script. The people looked up at the gods, the rulers, the sacrifices, and understood their place. And for foreign visitors, Teotihuacan didn't need armies. It conquered through imagery. Dignitaries returned, home with stories of wonder and fear, of feathered serpents, endless avenues, and crimson skies. In a world where gods ruled through awe, Teotihuacan cast itself as their chosen voice. And the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was the loudest of them all. At its peak, Teotihuacan was Mesoamerica's beating heart, stone and fire, gods and sacrifice, a city seemingly destined to endure. But around 550 CE, everything changed. And the silence that followed was as chilling as the serpent heads themselves. The fall of Teotihuacan was not dramatic. It was slow, then sudden. Warning signs emerged decades earlier: droughts, crop failures, growing unrest. The centralized power, the religious hierarchy, the celestial order, all began to erode. And then came the fire. Widespread burn marks have been found in elite areas: temples, palaces, administrative buildings. Even the Temple of the Feathered Serpent shows signs of violent destruction. What's telling is that residential areas remained largely untouched. This wasn't an invasion, it was likely a revolt, a rebellion from within. Those who once watched sacrifices may have risen against their rulers. The temple, once sacred, was desecrated. Its sculptures were defiled. Flames consumed its altars. And then, nothing. Teotihuacan wasn't abandoned overnight, but its spirit vanished. Trade routes collapsed, artistic production stopped. The rituals ceased, the elite disappeared. The temple fell silent, yet its mystery endured. Centuries later, the Aztecs arrived and were awestruck by the ruins. They believed the gods themselves had built the city. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They created new myths around its monuments. To them, the temple wasn't a ruin, it was sacred truth. But the irony is stark. the most powerful city of its age, founded on cosmic order and sacrifice, left behind no written records, only stone and questions. The gods, it seemed, had gone quiet. For over a millennium, the temple of the feathered serpent lay buried under dust, ash, and silence. Locals avoided it, farmers worked around it. The world forgot, until archaeology revived its memory. In the early 20th century, Mexican researchers began uncovering Teotihuacan. What they found was astonishing. A city older than the Aztecs, engineered to perfection. But it wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries that the temple revealed its most intimate and chilling secrets. In 2011, a sealed tunnel was discovered beneath the temple. It had been deliberately closed nearly 1,800 years ago, as if to guard its contents forever. Years of excavation revealed a symbolic underworld, a corridor lined with pyrite to mimic a starry sky, pools of mercury, and thousands of ritual objects: jade, figures, rubber balls, obsidian knives, and carved wooden masks. It felt less like a tomb and more like a message. Why such effort? What were they trying to protect or conceal? Some believe it was used for initiation rites. Others say it was a mythic space, a cosmic womb where gods were born, kings anointed, and divine balance negotiated. Even Mercury, once considered only toxic, may have represented the veil between realms. And throughout it all, one symbol echoed: the feathered serpent. Not just myth, but presence. In murals, carvings, and geometry, the serpent had not vanished. It had coiled inward into the city's core, and with every excavation, every unearthed jawbone or jewel, we inch closer to its message, written not in words, but in stone, sacrifice, and shadow. Modern tools, X-rays, drones, radar, have revealed much, but the temple still holds secrets. Today, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands not just as a monument to a lost civilization, but to a worldview that fused power, death, and the cosmos. Tourists snap photos, children laugh. But beneath their feet lie the remains of over 200 known sacrifices and thousands of untold stories. Its legacy goes beyond architecture. It's psychological, spiritual, cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradoxical deity of sky and earth, evolved through time. The Toltecs adopted him. The Aztecs rebirthed him as Quetzalcoatl, bringer of wisdom, god of sorrow, the one who promised to return. This transformation shows us that myths don't die, they adapt. Even today, echoes of the serpent remain in murals, literature, and national identity. Its image appears on coins, stamps, and state buildings, a symbol of mystery, ancient brilliance, and the wild spiritual force that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there's another, harder truth. The temple also forces us to confront belief's cost. It asks, how far will we go to touch the divine? What happens when power merges with faith? Can beauty exist alongside horror? In many ways, the temple is not just a relic. It's a mirror, a reflection of our need for meaning, our fascination with death, our genius for creation and destruction. The temple reminds us greatness casts a shadow, and even the mightiest civilizations must someday fall silent. Others knew it meant danger was near, or that a celebration had begun, or that the gods were paying attention. The earliest drums weren't just instruments, they were physical extensions of the human body, a heartbeat projected outward, a pulse echoing across valleys. Drumming wasn't meant to be watched or even simply heard. It was something people did together, around fires, beneath stars, or in caves where echoes made the very air vibrate. These primal rhythms formed an emotional language: joy, grief, warning, hope, all expressed not with words or symbols, but through repeated patterns of sound. Long before the first flute was carved or the idea of string instruments existed, the drum was already present, marking time, shaping rituals, and transforming scattered individuals into unified groups. In this way, the drum became humanity's earliest instrument, and quite possibly its first form of collective identity. Wherever people settled, they found something to hit, something to beat, something to mark time. Because even when language hadn't yet formed, rhythm had, and rhythm was everything. In early human societies, drums were more than musical tools. They were sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, every region created its own rhythms, but the purpose behind them was remarkably similar: to connect with what could not be seen. In Africa, one of the earliest birthplaces of drumming, rhythm was deeply woven into life, death, and ancestral ties. The djembe, carved from a single tree and covered in goatskin, was believed to carry three spirits: the tree it came from, the goat that gave it voice, and the hands that shaped it. Played in circles, the djembe didn't just support ritual, it was the ritual. Then there were the talking drums, able to imitate human speech through pitch and tone. In West Africa, these drums conveyed messages over great distances, sharing news, warnings, births, and deaths from village to village. Centuries before telephones, people were already using drums to send signals across landscapes. Across the oceans, Native American tribes saw the drum as a living being, the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It was played during ceremonies to honor ancestors, offer healing, or guide the souls of the departed. The large powwow drum, surrounded by multiple drummers, became both a musical and spiritual force. It formed a shared heartbeat, aligning humans with nature and spirit. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples use clapsticks and percussive foot stomps during the Dreamtime, a sacred era of creation. Far north, Inuit shamans in the Arctic beat frame drums to enter trances, communicate with spirits, or survive the long, dark winters. These weren't performances. They were acts of survival, healing, storytelling, and connection. To drum was to remember, to drum was to belong, and always drumming was communal, drawing people together into sacred circles, synchronizing their hearts and intentions. There were no scripts or stages, just movement, rhythm, and the unspoken power that united everyone. No matter where you were, hearing a drum in the distance meant something sacred was unfolding, something words could never quite capture. From sacred ceremonies to war-torn fields, drums have always had something to say, sometimes offering comfort, other times issuing command. As societies developed into kingdoms and empires, drums evolved too, becoming instruments of control, order, and fear. Before radios or loudspeakers, early armies used drums. In ancient China, massive bow drums were used to organize troops across wide plains. One thunderous beat could signal advance, retreat, or a change in direction. These sounds weren't just loud, they were tactical. Each rhythm carried meaning, and trained soldiers could interpret them even amid chaos. In Mesopotamia, temple drums not only marked rituals, but during wartime echoed through city walls to intimidate enemies with their relentless thunder. This wasn't mere noise. It was psychological warfare. When Roman legions marched, they carried the tympanum, a frame drum used during processions and by religious cults such as that of Cybele. Though not a core battlefield tool like horns or banners, its sound conveyed imperial symbolism, evoking discipline and power. But no military embraced drums like the Ottomans. Their meta bands, history's first military orchestras, unleashed overwhelming waves of sound, giant kettle drums, coups, booming double-headed davul, crashing cymbals. The relentless percussion struck fear into enemy troops. Some European accounts even describe soldiers freezing in terror before laying eyes on their foe. Off the battlefield, drums enforced power too. In royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe, drum ensembles announced arrivals, crowned monarchs, and underscored ceremonies. To beat a drum was to say, "Power is here. Even in the Americas, enslaved, peoples used drums to resist erasure. Despite bans and restrictions, rhythmic communication kept traditions alive and helped coordinate revolts. Even in chains, the drum would not be silenced. Whether used to affirm divine authority, enforce military order, or instill fear, the drum has always sent a clear signal. This is who holds power. This is who advances. And this is the rhythm of control. As civilizations expanded, so did their drumming traditions, each evolving with different intentions and philosophies. In the East, drums became refined tools of precision, ceremony, and spiritual depth. In the West, they leaned toward military power and orchestral spectacle. Two worlds, two directions, yet one heartbeat. In India, drums took on a sacred role as divine language. The tabla, with its sharp tones and fluid expression, became essential in classical and devotional music. But it wasn't just accompaniment. It was dialogue. Each stroke carried a name, a meaning, a syllabic identity. Indian drumming wasn't just rhythmic. It was poetic and linguistic, honed over decades. The tabla player was more than a musician. He was a master of rhythm's language. In Japan, the taiko emerged as a ceremonial powerhouse. Used in Shinto rituals, theater, and warfare, taiko demanded not only technical skill, but martial discipline. Players moved like warriors, grounded, precise, intentional. During festivals, the sound echoed across valleys, believed to drive away spirits and call gods to earth. In Indonesia, the kendang drum led the flow of gamelan orchestras. Its rhythms guided dancers and musicians through sacred temple ceremonies. These rhythms were intricate, interwoven, reflecting cosmic harmony in sonic form. In Europe, the story was different. Throughout the medieval era, drums served mainly as practical tools, directing soldiers, keeping time, and maintaining discipline. It wasn't until the Renaissance and Baroque periods that they entered formal music. Even then, they stayed in the background, supporting fanfares or echoing through grand cathedrals. This contrast reveals two philosophies. In the East, rhythm was art and spirit, tied to breath, chant, and meditation. In the West, it was order and utility, used to mobilize, march, and measure. Yet both traditions understood the drum's core power, to shape time, set tempo, elevate ritual, and unite people in ways words cannot. Whether spiritual or strategic, the drum remained central, always listening, always speaking. From mountain temples to jungle clearings, from desert fires to candlelit cathedrals, the drum has always occupied sacred ground, where humans reach toward the divine. Long before organized religion, rhythm was a sacred language, used to pray, to summon, to transcend. In African spiritual traditions, drums were more than instruments. They were divine entities. In Yoruba culture, for instance, the bata drum communicated with orishas, gods and ancestral spirits. The drummer was not a performer, but a priest. Each rhythm was a prayer, a coded message inviting the divine to join the living. Every pattern had intention. Every beat had direction. In Hinduism, drums appear in the hands of gods. The deity Shiva, as Nataraja, holds the damaru, a small hourglass drum symbolizing the universe's pulse. Its beat represents the shift from silence to sound, from void to creation. In Buddhism, monks use ritual frame drums in chants and meditations. Their quiet rhythms act like metronomes for the soul, gently guiding practitioners back to the present. They're not loud or commanding. They're reminders. Across the Americas, indigenous peoples use drums for vision quests, sweat lodges, and healing. The steady rhythm echoes the womb, aiding in trance and spiritual connection. Here, the drum is the prayer. Even in Christianity, where rhythm was often subdued, the drum found sacred purpose. In African American gospel traditions, drums became powerful tools of praise, supporting voices raised in faith, echoing struggle and hope. The drum remained not an accessory but a vessel, carrying energy, focus, and what words could not express. Because in moments where language fails, rhythm continues, and the divine always hears. For thousands of years, drums were solitary instruments, one person, one rhythm, one role. But with the rise of the industrial age, everything changed. In the factories, streets, and theaters, percussion was reimagined. By the early 20th century, separate drums weren't scattered across stages. They were combined into a single setup, the drum kit. Born out of necessity, the drum kit took shape as performance spaces shrank and budgets tightened. Instead of needing multiple percussionists for snare, bass drum, cymbals, and woodblocks, drummers began combining them. In 1909, the first bass drum pedal was patented. Suddenly, one foot could strike a massive drum, freeing hands for more complex rhythms. Over the next few decades, drummers added hi-hats, toms, cowbells, and ride cymbals, creating a compact orchestra. It was more than a setup, it became a throne. And then came jazz. In smoky bars and underground clubs, the drum kit came alive. Jazz drummers didn't just keep time. They told stories with rhythm, using swing and syncopation. Legends like Gene, Krupa and Buddy Rich turned the drum set into a lead voice. As jazz gave way to rock, drum kits got bigger, more toms, splash cymbals, and double bass pedals. Drummers like John Bonham, Neil Peart, and Keith Moon pushed the boundaries of energy and creativity. No longer in the background, the drummer became the engine. Today, the drum kit is everywhere, from churches to stadiums, punk garages to EDM, festivals. Even with the rise of digital drums and machines, nothing replaces the live experience. The sticks, the skins, the sweat. The kit is a modern symbol of rhythm, a fusion of tradition and innovation where one person speaks with many voices. The world moves in countless rhythms, and so do its drums. From culture to culture, each drum carries its own voice, shape, and meaning. They aren't just instruments, they're cultural emblems, made from local materials, shaped by local hands, infused with daily life's rhythm. In West Africa, the djembe remains a central voice in community gatherings. Its sharp slaps and deep bass tones tell stories, spark dances, and invite connection. Beside it, the dundun lays the foundation, a steady pulse around which others revolve. Together they don't just make music, they have conversations between people, ancestors, and the spirit world. And Kwikas leads samba parades through the streets, Breen. Then there's the frame drum, among the oldest instruments in human history, found in everything from the Persian daf to the Irish bodhran, from shamanic rituals to folk ensembles. Played with fingertips, mallets, or brushes, it shows that even the simplest instruments can hold sacred meaning. What ties all drums together is their purpose. Whether used in dance, healing, ritual, or revolution, each one reflects the spirit of its culture. Their rhythms speak of geography, history, and identity. The global family of drums isn't just varied, it's universal. Because wherever you are in the world, the earth still pulses with rhythm. By the end of the 20th century, the sound of drums began evolving, not in rhythm, but in texture. Physical drumming began to share space with the digital. Sweaty palms, wooden sticks, and calloused fingers now coexisted with circuits, pads, and software. The digital drum era had begun. It started in the 1970s with early drum machines. Devices like the Rhythmicon and Roland CR78 used analog components to simulate basic beats. At first, their sound was mechanical, even awkward, but musicians recognized their potential, precision, control, and infinite creative possibilities. Then came a game changer. In 1980, Roland introduced the TR-808, a drum machine that would define entire genres with its booming kick and crisp snare. Hip-hop, techno, electro, and trap all trace their roots to its synthetic beat. It wasn't about copying acoustic drums anymore, it was about crafting something entirely new. As digital audio technology advanced, so did the tools, electronic. Kits like Roland V drums allowed drummers to play naturally, while triggering thousands of preloaded or custom sounds. Musicians could now practice silently, record without microphones, and switch between drum kits instantly. And with the rise of computers came digital audio workstations, DAWs like Ableton, FL Studio, and Logic. Anyone with a laptop could build intricate rhythms by layering kicks, snares, hi-hats, and sub-bass into complex sonic designs. Finger drumming on MIDI pads became its own expressive art. Some feared this shift might spell the end for traditional drumming, that human feel would be replaced by digital precision. But instead of replacement, integration emerged. Acoustic. Drummers began adding triggers and samples to their setups. Producers layered live drums over machine-made beats. The organic and the synthetic began to work together. Digital drums didn't erase history. They reimagined it. Today, a single person in a bedroom can create rhythms that once required full ensembles. Ancient grooves from Africa, Asia, and the Americas are sampled, reshaped, and reborn on dance floors lit by neon. The tools may have changed, but the purpose hasn't: to move bodies, to shape time, to make silence speak. Across ages, across empires, through every shift in technology, one thing has remained constant: the drum is our oldest and most lasting voice. From tribal fire circles to concert halls, from sacred rites to digital raves, drumming has always been more than music. It's connection, within ourselves, between each other, to something greater. The drum is the heartbeat we all share. Not symbolically, literally. Before we're even born, nestled in the womb, we hear our mother's heartbeat. Steady, comforting, alive. From that moment on, we follow rhythm for the rest of our lives. The drum has stood beside us in celebration and sorrow, in worship and rebellion. It's marched with monarchs and risen with revolutions. It has echoed in temples and subway tunnels. It speaks every language because it is a language, one that bypasses thought and speaks directly to our bodies, our bones, our blood. In mourning, we drum to grieve. In joy, we drum to rejoice. And in the stillness between, we drum to remember who we are. Percussion continues to evolve. On street corners, handpan musicians weave calming rhythms. Indigenous communities hold onto ancient drumming traditions. Stadium crowds are energized by drummers in unison. Children bang pots and pans with natural excitement, even artificial. Intelligence is learning rhythm, but no algorithm can imitate the human spirit behind a single imperfect beat. Rhythm isn't just counted, it's felt. That may be why the drum has outlasted kingdoms and trends. Deep down, we all long for the anchor of shared time, a beat that tells us we're here together now. No matter how advanced our instruments become or how digital our lives grow, there's something grounding about skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood, a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum isn't just a relic of the past. It's a reminder that we were made to move in rhythm, to listen, to feel, to play. As long as we endure, the drum will never go silent and steal dust. The Empire State Building was more than architecture. It was a declaration. New York endures. While much of the nation faced hardship, Manhattan continued to rise, and its skyline reflected that spirit, elegant yet forceful, hopeful yet fiercely competitive. The Art Deco style captured these contrasts, geometric yet fluid, modern yet rooted in mythology. These skyscrapers weren't just built for function, they were sculpted forms, glowing like beacons of potential after dark. But beyond their beauty was intention. These towers were funded by tycoons who wanted more than profits. They wanted to leave their mark, both in the skyline and in history. By the close of the 1930s, Manhattan's outline had taken form. The city wasn't just a financial center anymore. It had become a monument to ambition. Its skyline didn't suggest progress, it declared it. After World War II, Manhattan entered a new architectural chapter, less decorative, more businesslike. Art Deco's elegance gave way to clean lines, glass and steel. America had become a global superpower, and New York functioned as its executive suite. The skyline adapted accordingly, not with grand spires, but with buildings that emphasized efficiency. In 1952, the United Nations headquarters rose along the East River, a striking glass box flanked by low marble structures. It reflected a new tone, international, forward-looking, built for diplomacy in the nuclear age. It was more than a building. It was a symbol of global order. Shortly after came the Lever House in 1952 and the Seagram Building in 1958, landmarks of the international style. These buildings, with their reflective glass facades and steel frames, stripped away ornament and sentiment. They didn't resemble cathedrals or castles. They looked like precision-built machines, sharp, efficient, and purpose-driven. The Seagram Building, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, was particularly influential. Its bronze-tinted glass, uniform grid, and open plaza introduced a new urban character, not meant to dazzle but to convey structure, discipline, and corporate strength. This was peak corporate architecture, minimal, commanding, and unapologetically functional. As business thrived, so did the skyline. Midtown emerged as a core for America's top corporations, banks, media, law. These new towers weren't competing in beauty, but in floor space, address, and visibility. The ornate features of the past, spires, gargoyles, were replaced with smooth, mirrored facades. These giant structures didn't just reflect clouds, they mirrored Wall Street's drive. Yet in their simplicity, these towers said a lot. They revealed a national fixation with growth, order, and modern design. This aesthetic spread beyond New York, shaping cities around the world. Still, beneath all the steel and glass, one truth remained. The skyline remained a symbol. Only now, it whispered strength rather than shouting beauty. By the late 1960s, New York's skyline was already an architectural marvel. Yet the city wasn't done dreaming. That vision took shape at Manhattan's southern tip, where two identical towers would soon redefine the horizon. Bold, divisive, and unprecedented, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, conceived as a center for global commerce, the project was led by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Architect Minoru Yamasaki chose a radical minimalist design, vertical lines, aluminum siding, and no setbacks. Each tower would climb to over 1,600 feet, eclipsing all others. The ambition was not just structural, but symbolic, a modern sanctuary for global capitalism. Construction began in 1966. An entire district, known as Radio Row, was cleared to make space. Engineers used a pioneering method, the slurry wall, to build deep into the riverbed while holding back the Hudson. It was one of the most challenging engineering feats of its era. When the towers were completed in 1973, reactions were mixed. Some called them bland or unimaginative. Others missed the detail of earlier skyscrapers, but to many, the Twin Towers were a statement. Bold, assured, unwavering. They didn't curve with the sky like the Chrysler Building. They didn't narrow like the Empire State. They stood firm, twin pillars of strength and scale. The World Trade Center wasn't just a complex. It became a global icon, a symbol of commerce, connection, and American power. Tourists came from around the world to visit the observation decks, dine at windows on the world, or simply look up in awe. For nearly 30 years, the Twin Towers shaped Lower Manhattan's skyline. They gave it symmetry and weight. Other cities, built taller, but none could match the symbolic gravity of those two side-by-side forms. The skyline had evolved again, not through decoration, but through pure, monumental ambition. Then, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, everything changed, not with cranes, but with chaos. In under 2 hours, the Twin Towers collapsed into fire, dust, and broken steel. Thousands died, and with them, the pillars that once defined downtown Manhattan disappeared. The attack wasn't just against people or buildings. It targeted what the towers represented: commerce, modernity, freedom, and aspiration. For decades, at the center stood One World Trade Center, originally called the Freedom Tower. Rising from the northwest corner of Ground Zero, it reached 1,176 feet, echoing America's founding year. But the message wasn't just patriotic. It was about persistence, reaching upward despite loss. Construction began in 2006, and by 2014, One World Trade Center opened. Its glass surface glistens like a crystal spire, shifting with the sky, glowing, fading, reflecting. It doesn't copy the past. It introduces a quiet strength. In 2011, the 9/11 Memorial opened. Two deep fountains where the towers once stood. Names of the victims are engraved in bronze, water flowing endlessly into darkness. It's more than architecture. It's part of the city's soul. Other towers followed: 3 WTC, 4 WTC, 7 WTC, sleek, modern, and purposeful. Together, they show a city not just rebuilt, but transformed. New York didn't just replace what it lost, it grew from it, honoring the past while embracing the future. A reminder of something deeply American, deeply human. You can bring a city down, but you can't keep it from rising. Today, Manhattan's skyline is more than a cluster of towers. It's a living emblem of ambition, resilience, and the American dream. No other silhouette is as recognizable. You can draw 5 lines, and people know it. It tells a story of fearless engineers, daring architects, immigrant workers, and relentless energy. It's about risk, reward, and reinvention, the pulse of New York. The skyline is never finished. It's alive, ever-changing. In recent years, it's reached even higher, but not in downtown Manhattan. The race for height has moved uptown, along Billionaire's Row. Pencil-thin residential towers like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and 111 West 57th Street now pierce the sky. Built for the ultra-rich, these towers are engineering marvels. Slender, wind-resistant, and controversial. Some see them as stark symbols of inequality, others as modern wonders. In Hudson Yards, a whole new district has risen: glass towers, art installations, and company headquarters where rail yards once stood. The skyline now stretches west, shifting with the city's evolving ambitions. Still, it remembers. The Empire State still lights up the night. The Chrysler still shines at dawn. One World Trade Center stands with quiet dignity. More than any statue, it's the skyline that captures New York, not just in shape, but in spirit. A place where humanity dared to rise again and again through highs and hardships. A city reflected in its steel and glass. The skyline doesn't just mark the end of a city. It marks the beginning of dreams. Because in Manhattan, the sky isn't the limit. It's just the next floor.